I've been wanting to get off of YouTube. I want to do my farewell video for making content. Of course, unless I come back and do my unfinished Texas map project. But I feel like I had to make this video because I was on another channel and somebody wanted to argue with me about the whole debacle going over there in Europe. So I'm going to go ahead and make this to reinforce some key points because there is a lot of information that, of course, people aren't getting, and people that aren't well informed and they listen to mainstream media and all the spin and narratives going on aren't being told the truth about. And the truth is that the proxy country has been losing since day one because the way that this has been gone about was not a full-scale invasion. And I've said that since the very beginning. I've said that since last year, that this was not a full-scale invasion, that this was a limited incursion, because you don't send in 70 combat battalions, which is 63 to 65,000 troops, to do a full-scale invasion. That's neither the amount of troops necessary to hold a country, nor is it to really be able to take over and totally annihilate the enemy force. But I will say this much: that 63 to 65,000 troops, going by average Russian battalion sizes, because this is 70 battalions. Remember, Russia's total number of armed forces is 1.2 million active duty, and they're raising their active duty numbers to 1.5 million, so they're training new troops. But when this began, their active duty was 1.2 million. They have a reserve of 2 million reservists. And they had a paramilitary or a parallel military force consisting of 300,000, what they used to call internal troops, they now call their National Guard. I guess they took that page from us. But those are paramilitary forces, as in like a parallel military to their regular military. So that's what paramilitary means. They used to be called internal troops back in the Soviet era, but then, when Russia became independent from the USSR, they renamed those their internal troops, which is 300,000. And of course, they have their own little foreign legion, which is called the Wagner Group. It's not really a PMC, as in it's not really a private military corporation at all, but rather it's a force that is often used by the Russian Ministry of Defense to give them an air of plausible deniability. Like, say, if they have wet works, they want to go take somebody out or assassinate people or do whatever they're doing, whatever dirty work the Ministry of Defense needs done, or even if they're just sending them overseas to train other militaries, that is what they're used for, because it gives them an air of plausible deniability. This Wagner group has taken center stage because in the Battle of Bakhmut, they're the main primary mover of that particular battle. And I was watching the Duran channel today, and the Russian Ministry of Defense had released information stating that they have given the Wagner group more ammunition each day than the whole entire Ukrainian army uses in a day. So the Ukrainian army, the entire Ukrainian army, is down to using 5,000 shells a day from their former 7,000 number, because they were earlier, when they were using their own stocks, they were able to use 6,000 to 7,000 shells a day. And Russia has been able to use throughout this entire conflict 20,000 to 50,000 a day. And the Wagner group alone is getting 10,000 a day, which is twice as much as the entire complete Ukrainian army uses in a single day. And that's just one tiny element of the forces involved in Ukraine that Russia has sent in. And they're still using their limited incursion forces. Now, I had to explain to this person, because, they're virtue signaling for Ukraine. Look, I don't give a damn about Russia, and I don't give a damn about Ukraine. As far as I'm concerned, we have no business in that. All it's doing is weakening us by getting us to send all our stocks over there. We demobilized an entire battalion of our air defenses so that we could send that equipment over to Ukraine. We had 16 battalions of Patriot systems. We already don't have as much air defense as Russia or China, but we demobbed an entire battalion to send the equipment overseas to that proxy conflict. Okay? So We're also sending lots of artillery, towed artillery in particular, and we're sending that over there too. We once had 4,200 towed pieces, but now we're down to 3,800, and we're sending all the ammo for all these systems over there. So we're depleting ourselves of ammo. You cannot fight a war without ammunition. How are you going to fight? How are you going to use your artillery, your tanks, your infantry fighting vehicles, armor personnel carriers, air defense, howitzers, rockets? How are you going to use all that when you're horribly, woefully depleted of it? We've sent half of all our rocket artillery, our 270 millimeter rockets for our MLRS and our HIMARS. They both shoot the same thing. The HIMARS is just a higher mobility form of the tracked vehicle known as the M270 MLRS. The HIMARS carries one pod of rockets, while the MLRS is able to carry twice as much, 2 pods. So for the HIMARS, we've sent them those too. And they're shooting ammunition like it's going out of style over there, and we're unable to keep up with the demand. So we've been having to go to the Middle East and North Africa to pilfer for ammunition. They even went to a dual Israeli and American ammo dump in the Middle East, and they've had to take shells from that just to give it to this proxy conflict. Do you understand what that means? That means that all this ammunition that we neither have the industry or the ability or the resources to replace is going to this conflict, which is doing nothing because Russia's not even trying, because they've only sent in a tiny small fraction of their total forces. This is insanity, and people don't see it. I mean, just because you see the truth, people think you're like pro this or pro that. No, I'm just pro truth. You're not seeing these facts and figures that I'm seeing. And you're not seeing how horrible it is for us to continue to support a lost cause. Because it is a lost cause, folks. It's a lost cause. We have no business there. We've got toxins getting into our rivers. We've got we got water issues, and not just with that wastewater in Ohio, but we've got water issues now coming from near Memphis. There's acid, highly caustic acids being released into creeks, which flow into the Mississippi, and we're not cleaning that up. We're not cleaning up very well the Ohio thing. We're not taking care of all our issues in Jackson, Mississippi from last year. We're not taking care of all the storm damage that occurred in Florida. No, we're not doing any of that. We're sending all this money to a stupid proxy conflict that we have no business being involved in, which is horribly depleting our already small, tiny, puny military that's turned woke and is worried more about pronouns. It's ineptly led. It's led by a bunch of idiots like Milley and Amer and morons like that, and that caliber of idiot. And, woke Lloyd Austin. I mean, all of them. They're running this country into the ground. We have the most inept, most idiotic, imbecilic people running everything into the ground. They're betting. They're like a gambler betting everything on one card game. Like, they put all their chips into this card game called the proxy conflict in Eastern Europe, and they're putting all of this ammunition. They're disbanding units in our armed forces. They're purging our armed forces of the best people, and they're sending all this equipment to a lost cause, to a country that is literally scraping the bottom of the barrel for recruitment. They're getting youngsters. There's enough anecdotal evidence, with the preponderance of that anecdotal evidence, you can easily see that the fact is that they're scraping the bottom of the barrel for recruits. They've had 10 million refugees flee their country. 10 million out of their total population of nearly 40 million. So you had 5 million also get annexed into Russia. So you lost in total about 15 million people. Your casualties are nearing 200,000. I'm talking about this proxy country. Their casualties are nearing 200,000, whereas Russia only has 20,000 between their military dead, their LPR and DPR proxies, and their dead. They each lost about 5,000 apiece of their militias since the beginning of this thing. So you have 20,000 versus nearly 200,000. It is a massacre on this proxy country, and we are basically like a gambler at the table, putting everything into a lost card game. It's a rigged game, and we're losing. So you can see the concern that I have. I have very serious concern. Like I said, I'm not aligned with any regime or anything like that because I don't belong to any worldly kingdoms. I belong to the kingdom of Yeshua Messiah in heaven. That's whose kingdom I long to be a part of and never lose. But as far as living here, yes, I live here, so I'm concerned about where I live. And I'm concerned that we're led by a bunch of inept morons that are running us into the ground and continually sending everything we have overseas. I'm also concerned by the fact that we're using, the vast majority of our army equipment is over 40 years old. And yeah, sure, some of it's been upgraded and is still plenty lethal on the modern battlefield, but we haven't really had any truly new military designs as far as army equipment is concerned. Nothing substantial. So we're giving away all these, these Patriot systems. We haven't really developed our air defenses like, Russia and China have, because Russia and China have put a lot of money into their air defenses and they have top-notch air defense equipment. I've gone over that all in my air defense equipment video. Now, we have less air defense equipment and our air defense equipment is not up to task like our enemies are. So, we have these Patriot systems that are old. Sure, they've been upgraded. Yeah, they're still somewhat effective, but they're not anywhere close to the newest iteration of the S-300, the S-400, or the S-500, which is designed for anti-ballistic missile, anti-satellite, and they can hit high-flying stealth aircraft too if they have to. But the S-400 can really handle that too. So our enemies have more air defenses and better air defenses while we're demobilizing entire battalions so that we can send equipment to this lost cause. And it's all getting destroyed, folks. It's a total waste. This country's going down the shitter. I think everybody already understands that, but this person on this other video tried to challenge me. He tried to say, well, Russia's GDP is blah 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 and our GDP is blah blah blah. I'm like, bro, our GDP is completely artificial and fake. Do you know by the Federal Reserve's own numbers that we've lost half of all our real GDP? Our true GDP is 10 to 12 trillion dollars because we've lost 12 trillion in the past 3 years, because it all started in 2020 when we killed small businesses, which were the backbone of our economy. They used to be the backbone of our economy, but when they shut all those businesses down and they couldn't afford to operate anymore, they all died. And then, only the strong made it out of that alive. So then after that, what you had was that you had this totally market-driven, this fake, funny money, bogus credit, usury, debt, market-driven, fake economy built on the petrodollar, which is entirely artificial and fake, that all countries have to do to sink our boat is pull out of the petrodollar and get rid of all their dollar-denominated assets, treasuries, so on and so forth. Not stop parking their wealth in dollars, and our ship is sunk. You already got OPEC joining with the Red Chinese and the Russians. You've got them forming their BRICS Plus. The BRICS Plus is going to be the true New World Order. It's not going to be a Western New World Order because there won't be any West. The West and the East are competitors, and they're competing for whose NWO it'll be. And it's not going to be a Western NWO. It's going to be a Chinese and Russian led NWO. The Bible tells us this because it's written in Revelation. There are 10 kings who give their power to the beast. Now, the beast can't rise until after something so horrific like World War III that the beast can't rise and truly have a unified world, but we're already seeing the architecture for the beast system being put into place. You see BRICS Plus. That is the architecture of the true beast system. You see the West trying to compete with that by building their own. They call it this reset, but it's going to fail because the West is going to be destroyed because we've weakened ourselves and our enemies have helped to weaken us by infiltrating and subverting us and basically putting us on the course to destruction. And this destruction will come at the hands of predominantly China, but also Russia. And Russia has done a very good job in grinding down all our capabilities by getting us to commit all these resources, all this ammunition, all this stuff we cannot replace because we don't have the industry that we once had. We cannot replace this stuff, and they're sending it all overseas. Do you know that it takes an entire year to produce only 250, 270 millimeter rockets. That's just an example. I'm just giving an example for our rocket artillery. And we have given them 12,000 of our rockets. That's like half of all the rocket artillery we had. You see, Western armies were basically originally built around the premise of conducting fast, short wars, to where they could maybe do a high-intensity war, but it would have to be very, very short because we lack the ammunition and the resources for a sustained conflict. Whereas you see Russia and China continually building and building and building and building. The quota never ends in Eastern nations. They're always building. They don't ever stop meeting quotas. They're always building more weapons, more tanks, more shells, more missiles. We're not doing that. We've deindustrialized, and our leaders, our idiotic, stupid, waste of skin leaders think that, we can just click some icon, like what's his name said over at the New Atlas, like Brian Berletic said. They think that they can just click some icon and then just new weapons will just show up like that, like it's some kind of computer game where they can just respawn new weapons. No, we don't have it like that. We sure don't have it like that. We cannot compete with the industrial might of China nor Russia, and it pains me to say that. It really, truly pains me to say that because, like I said, I could care less about either of those countries. I don't care, but I have to tell the truth. I'm a researcher, and I'm an unbiased researcher. Just because I live somewhere doesn't mean I have to cheer on the idiocy that goes on where I live. I don't have to cheer that on. If something's wrong, then I'm going to speak against it, and if something is going on, I'm going to tell the truth about it. And the truth is that we're woefully in decline. We're going to be annihilated in the Third World War by China and Russia, and we're going to be basically occupied and overcome. And we're going to become a Chinese colony, just like I warn about throughout all my work. That is exactly what our future is. And people can either, get real and learn how to cope with it and learn how to wade through it, learn how to navigate it, or they can be consumed by it because they don't want to learn about it because they're arrogant and ignorant, and they think they know everything, and they don't have to learn about tactics. They don't have to learn about how logistics affect everything, because they do affect everything, believe that. They don't have to learn how to cash away their resources to save them for hard times. They think they don't have to do anything. They think they're going to be sitting in their house when we get invaded, and they're just going to stay in their home and nothing's going to affect them. While an invasion's going on, they think they're going to just sit there like their house ain't going to get hit by artillery or rockets or missiles or whatever. They think they're just going to stay where they began at, and it doesn't work like that. Let me tell you, everybody will be forced from their home. Everybody will be forced to become a nomadic, mutual defense oriented tribe. You'll either have to become a mutual defense tribal, or you're going to become a slave, or you're going to be butchered when we get invaded. That's the way it is. Just like in my audiobook, people better pay attention to that because that's our future. You're either going to end up in a Laogai or a gulag, if it's Russians that take you, or you're going to be annihilated, or you're going to learn how to wade through it. You're going to learn how to defend yourself and defend yourself properly, and you're going to learn how to stay a step ahead by becoming a nomad or a semi-nomad, where you rotate in the same area to different spots so that you can stay ahead of the security sweeps and the cordons and searches and the drones and everything that's out there looking for you to destroy you. You can stay a step ahead of that, just like in the audiobook, and you'll learn how to defend yourself. I teach all kinds of things on this channel: tactics, logistics, just so many, field sanitation, so many things on this channel that can help you make it when you get driven away from your home, when you're driven out into the wilderness. You have to learn these things, or you're going to be... This is not for weak people. This is not for weak people. This is for people that have the will and the drive to make it. This is for the people that have the strength to survive what's coming. You're either going to make it or you don't. It's going to be sink or swim, live or die. It's not going to be any of this mamby-pamby, soft, American way of life type BS. That's all going to go. That's all going to go down the tubes. And you're either going to learn how to sink or you're going to learn how to swim. And there's going to be no way around it. we're dealing with China, who has 40% of the entire world's industrial base. And out of that 40% of the whole world's industrial base, they have the biggest single military industrial complex on the face of the earth. Even Norinco alone, just one subsidiary of the Chinese regime's arms manufacturing, just Norinco alone has 300 enormous manufacturing complexes for various different types of weapon systems. 300 massive factory complexes. And I'm talking, when I say massive factory complexes, I'm talking about the types of factories like our one tank plant in Lima, Ohio. They have 300 massive plants that are that size or larger of just of Norinco. There's other subsidiaries of the Chinese arms manufacturing. We only have one tank factory, by the way. China has a few handfuls of tank factories. They can easily outproduce us. We can only produce 80 tanks a year, and China can produce, 750 modern battle tanks. And when I say modern battle tanks, see, if they were producing the older models of tanks like World War II or early Cold War era, they could produce many, many more times that. But because these are newer tanks with better armor, better targeting systems, better countermeasures like their own trophy system equivalent that they have, and their IR and laser scrambling systems, of course, the gun stabilization, fire control system, combat data link, radios, all that stuff is new, and it takes an extremely long time to put into a brand new tank, which has brand new armor, by the way, a tungsten steel alloyed armor, because China is the world's biggest producer of both steel and tungsten. Also, they produce over half the world's titanium, which is a hard metal used in all kinds of, it's hard, but it's somewhat flexible, used in all kinds of military equipment. It can be used in artillery systems, like how we use titanium in our M777 howitzer. Well, China can use it in their howitzers, their rocket systems, or in their jet aircraft, because they would make the frames most likely out of titanium. And they're also the lead producer of aluminum, which is also important in aircraft manufacturing. So they can produce 400 fighters or ground attack aircraft per year. We can only produce 80 of those. 80 tanks and 80 jet aircraft is all we can produce in a year. They can produce 400 jets of the fighter or ground attack types, and they can produce 750 main battle tanks. So that's if they can produce that many battle tanks, then you already know they can produce 3 times as much in terms of infantry fighting vehicles and armor personnel carrier categories, because those take even less metal and less time to produce than does a main battle tank. So it's pretty easy to understand how outproduced we are. Russia too has pretty effective assembly lines. They can manufacture quite a lot of shells and missiles and even tanks now. They've spun up additional assembly lines for tanks, and they're really getting their war industries going. While we're sitting over here with our thumb in our ass. But like I said, I'm not aligned with any land or regime or any of that stuff, so I could care less really about that. But I'm mostly interested in the dynamics of international military affairs. That's what my channel is based on. That's what all this is. Everything I do is, predicated on that, on the study of international military affairs and how it's going to affect every single solitary person in this land, because the West will be defeated and the New World Order will be a Chinese and Russian New World Order. They're building the architecture. They're already making a BRICS currency, which will be your one world currency after World War III. China will colonize the United States. It'll be New China, just like in my audiobook. And everybody that doesn't get caught or annihilated will have to learn to become mutual defense tribal groups. And they will have to learn to look out for each other, and they'll have to learn how to always be on the move, because otherwise, if you're not on the move, then you're in trouble. And I'm going to be honest, not everybody's going to make it. Not everybody's going to make it. A lot of people are going to be butchered on the way, a lot of our people. So everybody has to get ready for that. This person I argued with on this other channel tried to give me this whole BS. Basically, the mainstream media narrative was what he was parroting to me, like this mockingbird media narrative. and he said something about me, supporting Russia. I'm like, why? Because I'm telling the truth about what's going on. That automatically means I'm supporting Russia. Well, that'd be like me saying that you're virtue signaling for Ukraine just because everybody else is doing it. You're jumping on that bandwagon and that fad because mainstream media told you to do it. So what is it? And I proceeded to explain to him how he doesn't understand the very, very basic things about military strategies or doctrines. He doesn't even understand what Russia's even really doing. And I had to explain and break it down that Russia hadn't even tried yet. They have not done a full-scale invasion yet. In fact, all they did was a limited incursion, because all they've sent in there was 70 combat battalions, which in Russian average battalion sizes, again, is 63 to 65,000 troops. But however, now that they see that they can't get a negotiated peace with Ukraine, they've therefore started to build up their full-scale invasion forces. That's that 540,000 number that's come up in the past. At first, it was 300,000, then they mobilized another 240,000 to go with the forces they already have in the east there in Ukraine. So we're talking a grand total now of about 600,000 plus troops. When I'm talking about the original 65,000 men, plus this additional 540,000 they're building up in both Belarus and also in the Belgorod region of Russia, as we know, and also in the south near Crimea. So while all these forces are building up and training and getting ready, like I said before, I could only assume when they would do things, because if I was the Russian general in charge of all of this, and I've seen how weak that I ground down, and really it's quite a military feat. It's quite a feat in military terms to be able to go in there, locally be outnumbered, and when I say locally outnumbered, I mean within the borders of that proxy country. You have, yes, your military is bigger than the proxy country's military, because Russia has 3.5 million men under arms, active duty, reserve, and paramilitary all combined. But they only sent in this tiny little limited incursion force, which inside of the proxy country's borders, the Western proxy country's borders, they were outnumbered 10-1 by the Ukrainian armed forces. And this force that was outnumbered 10-1 managed to grind down gradually this larger Ukrainian force. That is actually quite a feat in military terms. Of course, the West has to spin it and say that and lie. See, this is the biggest lie they ever told. They said that Russia did a full-scale invasion when in fact they did not. They did not. That is a lie. That's a lie. That's a lie. That is a lie. Because if it was a full-scale invasion, they would have taken the entire country over long ago. But instead, because they view the Ukrainians as a brother people, because you have to remember the history in this region. Ukraine used to be part of the USSR. They see them as a brother people. It would be like if part of the United States broke off and, maybe, I don't know, China went in there and started training them to fight us. And, we had to go in there. We would go in there soft. We wouldn't go in there with the intent of, slaughtering our brother people, would we? So Russia went in there with the kid gloves on, because that's how they view the Ukrainians. It's the same thing. It'd be like if we invaded Canada. We wouldn't want to go in there and brutalize the Canadian people, because they are like a brother people to us, They're just like Americans, but more mild-mannered and more, mild-tempered people. But like if we invaded Canada, we wouldn't want to go in there and brutalize those people. We would probably send in a small force, just to handle the Canadian military and try not to destroy the Canadian infrastructure and try not to hurt their people. That's what Russia has done to Ukraine. But now that they see how stubborn Ukraine is and that they don't want to negotiate a peace, that is why they've built up this larger invasion force. These are proven facts, and Russia's not the one begging for weapons. They're doing just fine on their own. They have lots of stocks left from the USSR. And let me tell you, artillery shells last a lot longer than their expiration dates, because when I was in the Army, I was a 13 Bravo. I was field artillery. We were still using shells from the 70s. You could tell by the lot numbers on the shells. I mean, these were older shells, and they worked just fine. Russia has lots of old shells left over from the Soviet era. Now, that's one thing that the Soviet Union could actually do and do very well, was crank out lots of ammunition. They were a true guns and butter economy back in the Soviet era, and the Russians have enormous stocks of shells. So do the Chinese, for that matter, but they both have well in excess of 1 billion shells. Well, the Chinese do, but the Russians are about 1 billion. And when I say 1 billion, I mean shells of different sizes all combined. Like they have 122 millimeter shells, they have 130 millimeter shells, 152 millimeter shells, 203 millimeter shells, and they have lots of them all combined, which equal about 1 billion shells, which is why they've been able to continuously fire 20 to 50,000 shells a day, every day since this conflict started, and there's no end in sight. They continue to do it because they have these humongous stocks of shells, and even added to that, they're producing still 10,000 shells a day, every day. They're producing 10,000 shells a day, every day. So you add that 10,000 a day, if they continued on the path that they're on for like 37 or 38 years, they would run out of shells eventually. But because they're continually producing shells, even though it's not as much as they use, it would still maybe push that number up a little longer. So it would be about 40 years before they would run out. So they could continually do this mathematically for 40 years at the rate that they produce shells and at the rate that their stocks are being expended, because they have vastly larger stocks than we do. Like I said, Western militaries are more oriented around faster, shorter wars. Like if it came to a high-intensity military-on-military conflict, it would have to be very, very short for the West, because the West is not prepared for industrial warfare. I'm going to quote that from the Duran channel because they've got that term correct. It is industrial warfare, and we don't have the industry to even match Russia, much less China, who we only produce 1/6 of the amount of tanks and aircraft that China can crank out, and ammunition, no doubt. China has a massive lead on us, and so and China outproduces Russia too. So I mean, we can't compete with either one of them. So our militaries also in the last 20 years. Let me explain this. In the last 20 years, our militaries have switched from training to fight another military. They've switched from training to fight other militaries to basically doing counterinsurgency operations. Now, in the early 2000s, when I joined the Army, we were learning to do both at the time. But because low-intensity warfare in both Iraq and Afghan had gone on for so long, our whole military had forgot about fighting other militaries. They basically have become oriented, completely built upon training to fight police actions. I call that a police action. Other people do too. A police action, or low-intensity warfare, or counterinsurgency operations, whatever you want to call them, fighting partisans, whatever you want to call it. That was what our whole military was geared around. So you had our militaries trimmed down substantially. Like, look at the European militaries. Look how small they are. In the video I made called Failed State, I talk about how puny their tank forces are. I mean, all of them combined, including their storage numbers and everything for tanks, Germany, Britain, France, and Italy all combined only have 1,135 tanks. And Russia has 12,500 tanks, and they have about 8,000 more in the boneyards. Then some of those tanks they could actually resurrect. Like, they can pull them from the boneyards, put them back through the tank factory, give them a full refurb, and send them out. They really don't have to do that, but they could. But they have all these tanks sitting out in their boneyards rusting. Now, some of them are just too old, and it'd be just too much trouble to refurb. But they have about 1,000 T-72s, and they have T-64s and they have T-62s, and some of those are able to be refurbed if they felt like pulling them out and actually going through the trouble. It would be like the T-54/55 series that they would probably leave alone. They would probably leave those alone, but they could pull the other tank models out, give them a refurb, especially the T-64s and the T-72s, because those were the ones that were retired the most recently that they have out in the boneyards. Of course, they still use the T-72 B3M, but I'm saying that these were the original T-72s that were retired. Some of them were, because they scaled back their military spending, so they put those in the boneyard, but they could pull those right out, refurb them, upgrade them, and send them right back out to equip a new unit or whatever, or make up for whatever battlefield losses there were, whatever. But they didn't lose many tanks because since this whole thing began, their real tank losses were only 600 main battle tanks, and not all of those were even total losses. They were able to repair about a third of those and send them right back out. So their total tank losses were only about 400 since this entire thing began. They've lost other vehicle types. When you add up all the different vehicle types combined, yeah, sure, they maybe lost about 2,000 vehicles of different, but that's all types combined, and not all of them were even total losses. So there's a lot of things that they're not telling you because the media is so invested in this, because the regime here is so invested in this, because they hate Russia. Why do they hate Russia? Because Russia is their rivals. China are their rivals for a new world order. They can't have their rivals getting ahead of them, can they? Well, it's too late for that because our system is already going down and there's nothing viable with which to replace it. There are no great reset cities. There's no working green energy that's able to power an entire economy. I mean, they're talking about making green military vehicles, like a green armored vehicle. They're invested in this. They're really researching how to make a green armored vehicle, like a military armored vehicle it's powered by green energy. They said that it might take them 10 years to be able to do this. This is the type of bullshit that they're pouring defense spending money into instead of actually using it on things that work, like tried and true designs. They're wasting it on all these green projects and all this other garbage, and they're wasting money on giving PowerPoint trainings on how to be more woke, and they're getting rid of all our best people to replace them with this new generation, which I absolutely have zero faith in when it comes to their ability to be a real soldier. We have this softer, weaker generation, this participation trophy generation, led by inept leaders, stupid, inept, foolish leaders, that wear more decorations than General Eisenhower wore, who won World War II for the Western Allies. You got Milley up there. He has so many damn decorations on, and he lost Afghanistan. He's the general that lost Afghanistan. He lost a war, and he wears more medals than Eisenhower. So that should tell you everything. We are not in a state to be able to fight our rivals, to be able to fight Russia, and especially not China. We would get annihilated by China, even the Pentagon's own supercomputers since the mid-2000 teens, about 2016, 2017 timeframe, started to predict us losing every war to China. That's what their projections put out. It was a prediction that we lose every war to China because that's what their projections are. That's a prediction because they take all these different factors of both nations and they put it into a live simulation where they simulate an entire war within this supercomputer, and they do it over and over and over, and all the outcomes are the same. We lose. So we also lose in the NATO war drills with Russia. That those war drills showed how weak we are when it comes to our abilities and logistics. I mean, even the French and British, as I've mentioned before a few times, they run out of artillery, howitzer ammunition by day number 8 in a full-scale war with Russia. You cannot fight a war without artillery. You're basically done. You're done. And they don't have the number of artillery pieces, not even all combined. They don't even come anywhere close to Russia in artillery numbers, or China, because Russia and China basically have the same amount of artillery, for basically everything. I mean, the West is nowhere even near Russia or China in artillery numbers or in the amount of ammunition they possess. So that tells you everything. The West is not at all ready to fight industrial warfare. Western militaries are not what you've been told. They're not as strong as what you've been told. You got to understand, we have not fought a major power since the Korean War and World War II, because both of those wars were very close together. The last time we truly fought a major power was when we fought China in the Korean War, and we did not win against China. And this is before China massively industrialized, massively grew their technological base. This is before they became the monster that they are now. And we could not beat them then because they had sheer manpower. They overran us in Korea, basically. They pushed us all the way back from the Yalu River to the 38th parallel, where things continued to seesaw between all the different Western countries that sent military contingents, including ours, and them. Just basically, it was all China by that point, because we'd already crushed the North Korean military. There wasn't really very much left of it by that point. So it was largely us. All these different Western contingents, they called it the United Nations forces back then in the Korean conflict. So these United Nations forces all fought against China, and they could not defeat China. And this was before China wasn't even fully industrialized like they are now, where they have 40% of the whole world's industry. They outproduce everybody in arms manufacturing. Even the Duran channel said that in that video I posted. They've said that in a lot of videos. Brian Berletic says it over on New Atlas, because we're all seeing the same information. All the information I study tells me that China is ginormous. And nobody in the West, minus a few people that really do their due diligence, wants to even admit that, because people are prideful and they don't want to believe that China has surpassed us. I don't want to believe it either. I don't want to see this, this evil totalitarian communist, secular humanist police state despotic regime. I don't want to see them be the top dog in the world, but they are. And even I have to admit it. As a former U.S. Army combat veteran of OIF, even I, as a researcher, as a combat veteran, I have to admit the truth. And the truth is, we come nowhere near China. We're a nation that is $30 trillion in debt. Well, really more than that now, because we continually print and spend. We're about to have we're like a man that's about to be hung with the hangman's noose around his neck. We're about to have the proverbial table pulled out from under us, which is the only thing holding us up, which is the petrodollar. We're about to be having all of that pulled out from under us, and we're going to hang by our debt, because nobody is going to park their money here anymore. Nobody's going to invest in us, because this is an untrustworthy country by their standards, because we've gone into all this debt and we've not paid any of it off yet. It's nobody's going to trust us. We're going to lose everything. We can't even afford. We're not going to be able to afford to have a military by that point. Our collapse will be even worse than the Soviet Union's collapse was, because we have even more debt than they had at their peak. So there's a lot of things, there's a lot of factors that go into what's about to happen. And it's all going to start to come to pass here very soon, very soon. Remember, according to the word, the Bible, according to the word, in Jeremiah, we have a famine, which is a collapse. We have a collapse. That comes first. So that's going to be very soon. We have a collapse. Then we go into a multi-way, multi-factional, sectarian civil conflict, exactly like what happened in Syria. But because our nation's even bigger with even more people, it's more likely to have even more factions than even the Syrian civil conflict even had. And we are going to have a Syrian-style civil conflict. And then after that, we get invaded. We will be so incredibly weak by that point. I mean, we won't even be able to lift a finger to do anything about it. We won't. We won't have the ability to. How are we going to do anything then? When all our best, most capable, able-bodied people butchered each other to make the job of the aggressor nations just that much easier when they occupy this place. See, in my audiobook, it's a situation where we did not have a civil conflict. We just had hard economic times. And then China and Russia militarily crushed us. But then there were uprisings against them because we still had experienced, able-bodied people to train people to become partisan fighters against the occupation forces. But in real life, that's not going to happen if you have an internal conflict first that weakens you severely so that you don't have the capabilities to have any kind of partisan, guerrilla insurgent, whatever you want to call it, uprisings against the Red Chinese and the Russians. So here's the thing, China has the most tanks in the world, and I go by all their numbers. I go by their storage numbers. See, the way you get numbers is you do deep research into multiple different sources to get a baseline, and that's a baseline for your numbers and everything else. Then you go through that number, you see how many items have been sold, put into storage, retired, and if it applies, destroyed in battle or battle damaged and repaired, put back into service. You go through all these different metrics through these numbers, and then you see how many, if it's a storage number, you see if it's for long-term storage, like if it's mothballed basically, like put into long-term storage, or if it's in storage for a unit, like a reserve unit or a paramilitary unit. So China has the most tanks of anybody on Earth. They have 23,100 tanks. 19,300 of those are main battle tanks, and 3,800 are light tanks. When I say tanks, I'm talking about their Type 62G light tanks, their Type 63 light tanks, their Type 15 light tanks, their Type 59 main battle tanks, their Type 80, 85, 88 series main battle tanks, or Type 69, 79s, their Type 96s, and their Type 99s. All of those are main battle tanks. That's the combo of all those numbers together. Then you have infantry fighting vehicles and armor personnel carriers. And if you want to include the other category with that, which is armored fighting vehicles, like your wheeled, like MRAPs and armored trucks, that's another 24,300. So you combine 24,300 to the 39,400 APCs and IFVs, and you get 63,700 armored fighting vehicles of the IFV, APC, armored truck, MRAP varieties. Then artillery. China has 5,385 self-propelled guns. They have 5,300 towed pieces. They have 6,200 rocket artillery. And in long-term storage, they have even more. They have between 10 and 12,000 PL66s, Type 83s, and Type 96s, which are like 122 millimeter howitzers. They have a whole bunch of those in storage, in long-term storage. If they brought them out, gave them a once-over refurb, they could equip entire new brigades and artillery divisions with those weapons. They can also produce newer ones because China has the largest military-industrial complex on the face of the earth. The air defense artillery, they have the biggest air defense artillery arm on Earth. The only one that comes near them is Russia, but Russia's the second. But China, in air defense, they have 3,886 air defense weapons, and they have an additional 15,000 57 millimeter guns in long-term storage. But that 3,886 number is their air defense, their missiles and all that. So I'll compare our stuff after this. But the only place they're really lacking in compared to us, but it doesn't matter because they have the best and biggest air defense arm in the world, the only thing they're lacking compared to us is in helicopters. They have 560 plus attack helicopters. I think this year that number grew by another 200 because they've been producing 200 a year since 2020. So they now have 560. It could even be 760 attack helicopters, but I'm just going to go with the low ball of 560. They have 560 attack helicopters and 1,000 utility helicopters. Now, that doesn't matter, though. It really doesn't matter because they never really put a lot of emphasis into helicopters until recently, but it didn't matter because they have the best air defense. They can shoot all our helicopters down. And even I didn't even include short-range equipment like FN-6 man-portable air defense systems. Those are a helicopter's worst nightmare, for like close-range type of air defenses. Those FN-6s are very advanced, and China has multiple hundreds of thousands of those. They're mass producing these things like it's gone out of style. Now we, in terms of tanks, we only have 6,400 main battle tanks, and we have 400 more in long-term storage that the Marine Corps got rid of, which they never should have gotten rid of, in my opinion. If I was running the armed forces, I would have never allowed that. We need everything we can get. But right now, besides the 400 in long-term storage, we only have 6,400 main battle tanks. China's best tanks, the Type 99A and Type 96Bs, which are actually better than the Abrams, they are better for a lot of reasons. I went over all of that in my Chi-Com tank video, all the technical specs and everything. But they have 7,500 of between both of those tank types because they have 2,500 Type 99As, and they have 5,000 Type 96Bs. So they're top tier tanks. They have more of than what we do, and that's their best two types of main battle tanks, which are both basically they outclass our Abrams tank. We don't have, and then plus besides that, they have another tank. It's called the Type 85, which is part of the 80, 85, 88 series because there's different turret designs and different gun configurations. But the Type 85s, they have another 600 of, which those are pretty damn good. I mean, they're good tanks. I mean, like they're not as good as the 96B or the 99A, but they're still pretty formidable because of the gun systems they have, the weapon systems on board. That 125 millimeter gun has better range than our 120 millimeter rifled gun does. And the turret design is better than the Type 88 or 80 that's on the 85. The 85 has a better turret design. It's got all the modern communications and combat data link in it as well. So that I would consider that a top tier tank along with the 96B and the 99A. But I would say that it's not as good as the 96B or 99A. But I would put it up there with them. So I guess you could say that they have over 8,000 top tier tanks. And then their Type 90 or Type 69 79s and the Type 59Ds and Type 59Gs are also very formidable. Even though they're older upgraded tanks, they're very formidable. They have all the modern amenities that every modern battle tank has. Gun stabilization, infrared and night vision, combat data links installed. They have everything a modern tank would have, but they're just an older upgraded tank, which is still lethal on the modern battlefield because if you pair that 105 millimeter main gun on, say, the Type 59D, you pair that with depleted uranium ammunition or with a tungsten sabot round, you can kill an Abrams with a side hit or a back hit when you're doing true maneuver warfare and you're maneuvering around your enemy and you get in close enough. Yeah, you can totally kill an Abrams. They're still lethal enough to do that. And they have a lot of old upgraded tanks, a lot of them, but they still have a lot of top tier tanks too, which are better than the Abrams, like the 96B and the 99A, because of all the things that are in those tanks and the type of armor it has, the tungsten steel alloyed armor it uses. I would say it's superior to the Chobham armor that's in the Challenger or in the Abrams, which has basically the same armor. So Now we have less tanks with 6,400 tanks, so that's only like 1/4 of the tanks that number of tanks China has, and it's about half of the number of tanks Russia has. And then the infantry fighting vehicles, armored personnel carriers, and armored fighting vehicles, which is your wheeled vehicles like MRAPs, we only have 20,000. We have 20,000. China has over 3 times as much. They have 63,700, like I read on the back. Self-propelled guns, we only have 1,000 compared to China's 5,000. What was it? 5,000 and hold on, 5,385. We only have 1,000 self-propelled guns. We now have 3,800 towed pieces because we've given 400 to that proxy country. And most of the ammo, we've given them 3/4 of all the shell stocks we had, 155 and 105. Do people see how dangerous this is? That we're involving ourselves in this, and we're losing everything to this black hole. All our ammo, we've already given away most of our anti-tank missile systems. The Javelins weren't the only thing. We gave them a lot of tow systems and various other systems too. I even have the data sheet from the beginning of the conflict that I even used as a thumbnail on one of my videos. It had the initial systems that we gave away, and it was frightening to see that we gave away so much to this lost cause. And we're not going to be able to easily replace it. Let's see, towed pieces, yeah, 3,800 now compared to China's 5,300. Yeah, they have like way more than we do. Rocket artillery, we only have 600 rocket artillery systems. 600. China has 6,200. We only have 600 rocket artillery. Air defense artillery. After we demobilized an entire battalion to send all that overseas, to give the equipment over to them, we now have 1,100. We used to have 1,200. Now we have 1,100 Patriot systems. And we have 42 THAAD systems, which are like our anti-ballistic missile systems. They're not as good as like the Russian S-500 or the Chinese FK-2000, but they're made for hitting ballistic missiles, and they don't even really do it all that well. You know, I mean, they might get 1 or 2 as they re-enter, but they're not really. There's not enough of them, and they're not as good as what our enemies have. Because again, we don't put that much into our air defenses. Now, helicopters, that's the one area where we actually, we have substantial numbers in. We have 3,400 attack helicopters, and we have 2,063 utility helicopters. So that's the one area where we have more than China is our helicopters. But again, it doesn't matter because China has enough air defenses to swat each and every one of them out of the sky. So really, it's no biggie, like they used to be. Helicopters used to be a huge deal on the modern battlefield, but as air defenses get better, helicopters become more and more, I wouldn't say obsolete, but they take a back seat compared to everything else. Because if your enemy has really good air defenses, your helicopters ain't going to be able to do a whole lot of anything. Same with aircraft carriers. I'm going to go ahead and say that. China has the biggest, most technologically advanced Navy. They have 355 frontline ships for combat ships, and they have 200 auxiliary ships. We have a grand total, and that's our auxiliary and combat vessels. We have a grand total of like 400 and something. Hold on. I have to get the sheet out. I have it all wrote down. Hold on. Damn, let me find it. Okay, yeah, we have 490, and that's everything. That's our combat vessels and our auxiliary ships. So China has 555. 555. That's their 200 auxiliary and 355 combat vessels. So they have a bigger, more advanced Navy than we do now. They went in 30 years from a brown water littoral Navy, which is a coastal and riverine force. They went in 30 years from a brown water Navy to a green water Navy to a full-fledged blue water deploy around the world Navy. China has made leaps and bounds, folks. And not only that, their combat air fleet is the biggest and most advanced combat air fleet on the face of the earth. They put us to shame. I've shown a lot of their aircraft in my community tab. I showed some of the main ones of theirs, and that's just their Air Force aircraft. That's not even their naval aviation, because they have naval fighter jets and things too, like the J-15 and the J-31 stealth aircraft. And I showed some of the Air Force models of theirs, but they have even even more models than that. They have a lot of combat aircraft, folks. They have of the J-82Bs, which are like heavily modified, like basically a massive upgrade. They're a fourth generation fighter. They're like a massive upgrade from the MiG-21, which is like, you know, it left that in the dust. This thing has new radar, a new radar nose cone on it. It's got, you know, all kinds of advanced avionics systems and weapon systems on board. This J-82B is very maneuverable, very fast. But these aren't frontline planes. They use these more in like a recon, like an aerial recon role. They have 410 of those remaining. They have 600, actually it's 750, but they have 150 in storage for reserves. They have 600 frontline J-10 fighters, which are basically they look similar in some ways to an F-16, but they're still a different aircraft. They have some additional aspects of the design, especially in the exterior. Like up front, they've got some additional fins there, on the side, but these things are a bit more advanced than the F-16 because they have more advanced avionics, targeting systems, computers, all that stuff on board. They have 600 of these as front line. They have another 150 in storage for reservists, sort of like the J-2Bs. They have most of those for reserves, but they use some for aerial recon. The J-11s, they have 500. Which are another badass fighter jet they have. They have the J-16, which they have 372 of now. 372 J-16s. They have the new JF-17. It's like a 4.5 generation fighter jet, just like the J-16. See, the J-82Bs, the J-10s, and the J-11s, those are like fourth generation aircraft. Now, the J-16s and the JF-17s, those are like 4.5 generations, similar to how they call the Eurofighter Typhoon and the Rafale and the Saab Gripen. They call those 4.5 generation aircraft. Well, that's basically the J-16 and the JF-17, which the J-16 is, like I said, they have 372 of those. JF-17 is 170 of those. And the J-20, their fifth generation stealth fighter for their Air Force, they have over 200 of. They have is about 240 as of this year, because they've been continually building those. Now they also have a ground attack aircraft like the JH-7. They call that the Flying Leopard. They've produced 2,400, but they only have 400 as frontline ground attack aircraft. And these are pretty badass ground attack planes. They carry heavy payloads. They have good maneuverability, good speed, but they have 400 as frontline aircraft. I don't know what they did with the other 2,000. I don't know if they were sold. I couldn't find any information on it during my research. I didn't know if they sold them, put them in long-term storage, or use them for reserves. I don't know. I don't know about the other 2,000. All I know is they produced 2,400 of these, and only 400 are in frontline service. Now they have the Q5s, the Nanchang Q5s. They produced 1,300 of those. They kept 600 for their reserves. And they sold the rest. So the Q5s were another type of ground attack jet. They kept 600 for reserves, but they sold the rest of the 1,300 they produced. Then they have the H-6K strategic heavy bomber. They have 242 of those, and they have an unknown number of H-20 stealth bombers. The new stealth bomber they have an unknown number of H-20s because they've been producing those now for almost 3 years. And that's a state secret, so I can't find any information on how many of those they have. Just assume that they have a few wings of those by now. They probably have, I'd say about 40 or maybe, 36, 40 or something like that. So all in all, that is 3,102 combat aircraft, including like reserves and everything. Like that's enormous. That is an enormous amount. That's not counting their naval aviation either, because their naval aviation, they have what was that number? It was like 400 something. I have that written down on a separate piece of paper, but their naval aviation, they have like another 400 and some combat aircraft. So just their Air Force aircraft alone is enormous. That's a lot more combat planes than we have. The only reason our Air Force is even a little bit bigger than China's at this point is because we have a lot of support planes. We have a lot of cargo aircraft. We have that the Air Mobility Command has all the cargo planes. They have an enormous amount of cargo aircraft. They have a few thousand cargo aircraft. We also have more mid-air refuelers, AWACS. China has AWACS and mid-air refuelers and cargo planes too. They just don't have the number that we do yet. And we have more trainers than China has. Like trainers are like your training aircraft. But China's catching up in the support aircraft category, but they already have way more combat planes than we have, so which means that they have the ability to carry out a much wider, much larger scale air campaign and air war than we have. So, and then Russia too outnumbers us in combat planes when you take all the strategic heavy bombers that they maintain for their reserves, because all those Tu-16s, all the Tu-22s, all the Tu-95s, the Tu-160s that they've just come out with, Tu-161s. I mean, all those heavy strategic bombers. Russia has 571 heavy strategic bombers, and that's everything they have in storage plus their active numbers. They also have a lot of helicopters. Not as many as we have, but they maintain a lot of their old Hind helicopters, their Mi-24s, 28s, all those. They maintain those in storage for reserve units, because Russia, when they cut their defense spending, they just put all that stuff into storage and they maintain it. Instead of using it, which costs money because you have to constantly repair it, they just keep it in storage and they keep it maintained for a time of need when they mobilize their reserves. Because again, they have 2 million reservists for their military, for Russia. China is just freakishly ginormous at 29 million men under arms. They have a 20 million man paramilitary consisting of their PAP, which is their People's Armed Police, their National Militia, which is like their home defense force, it's like the equivalent of our National Guard, but it's paramilitary. They have the Marine Militia, which scared the hell out of the Philippines 2 years ago when the Marine Militia was floating off of their shores. And that's only a third-rate Chinese military unit and scared Philippines to death. And China's third-rate units are that scary. Imagine how much their regular and higher-rate units are, because China's military has gotten basically overhauled since the 90s, and the way it's organized now is insanely effective because they've organized their armed forces into combined arms forces instead of having whole infantry corps, whole tank corps, whole artillery. No, they broke all that up and they reconfigured it into these newer, better group armies where they combine all these different types of units into one thing. They have a lot of electronic warfare assets in their units now. They have artillery and infantry and mechanized infantry, tanks all combined in these group armies. Some of them have aviation assets. All of them, almost every single one of them has a special forces battalion, regiment, or a brigade attached to them too, which gives them irregular warfare capabilities blended with everything else they have. So these group armies that China has are insanely potent group armies just by how they're organized, and their training regimens are vastly better than what we do now for our military, which is puny, depleted, it's hollowed out, it's shrinking because it's being purged. I mean, we don't have anywhere near the number of personnel that China has, and we have less personnel than Russia, too, and Russia's not even anywhere near as big as China either, but we have less people than Russia, and our people are spread around the world. And we have this new generation of wokesters and weaklings and people that had a soft upbringing. I have no faith in our military, the rate that is going. It's an utter joke. It's a complete joke. And it's being depleted and hollowed out by a proxy conflict. So as we lose all this stuff, all this ammo, everything else, it's becoming clear and it's becoming evident that things are much worse than the lying, who lies literally about everything. Everything they say is a lie that comes out of their mouth. The lying mainstream media will even tell you. Everything is much worse than what they tell you, and they won't even tell you the truth that we've been surpassed by China long ago. Well, not long ago, but I would say about 6 years ago. I used to say 5 years ago last year, but it's been 6 years now that China has taken the mantle of the sole world superpower away from us. 40% of the world's industry, 1.5 billion people, the biggest middle class on earth. They have three times as many middle class people as there are people in our entire nation. They don't need to sell anything to us. Their own domestic market is booming right now. China is experiencing growth, and Russia's ruble is stronger than it's ever been. Russia's experiencing growth. The sanctions backfired. China doesn't need us either. Their domestic market for their middle class is 3 times bigger. Well, really, their whole market's 5 times bigger because they have 5 times more people than we have. But I'm speaking of their middle class that has the money to be able to afford things. Their domestic middle class market is 3 times bigger than our entire nation's population. They do not need us for anything. They've gotten the crown jewels from the West in terms of technology. They've used it to build their own indigenous capabilities to where they've basically springboarded themselves ahead of us because they took all the tech we had, they took it for themselves, reverse engineered it, built their own capabilities from it, and now they're making technology that's better than our technology. They've surpassed us in AI, robotics, lasers and directed energy. They have particle colliders. They're making miniature plasma stars that they harness free energy from. China is light years ahead of us. They had 5G before we did. And 5G is a weapon. It's a weapon. And, of course, yes, it has commercial uses. It's not healthy and it's nasty. It's a nasty thing because it's radiation, but it's a weapon. You can use it for making radars. You can use it for transferring data. There's an unlimited amount of uses for that technology. They make holograms out of it in China. China's cities are light years more advanced. Their public transportation, their highways. I can't stand Red China. I loathe it. I warn about it all the time. But while I do so, I explain why I warn about them. It's because they have surpassed us that I have to warn about them. They're at real, clear, and present danger. And they're led by a madman, a secular humanist madman, Xi Jinping, who wants to take us over and colonize us. If they didn't have designs on us and they weren't planning on doing that, I wouldn't have to warn about them. I wouldn't even talk about it. But they have the power, the might, the military might, the hard power, and the soft power to be able to make their dreams come true and build their own Chinese NWO. The New World Order will be Chinese. There's no question about it. It'll be a Sino-Russian New World Order because Russia is going to help them. They're Russia, not to denigrate Russia, but Russia only has basically 1/10 of China's population. They don't have anywhere near the amount of industry China has. I mean, they have more war industry than we do, but I'm saying Russia's definitely the junior partner there. I mean, China's massively bigger than Russia. Their economy, their real GDP. When I say real GDP, I mean their real economy, not fake funny money like our Western economies, but their raw industry, their domestic markets, their overseas markets, their influence. China is massively bigger than Russia. Their military is massively bigger. Their industry is. But I'm saying Russia is still a power to be reckoned with because at the end of the day, Russia still has the world's biggest nuke arsenal. They still have the most natural resources of any nation on Earth, and they still have the second best conventional forces after China's. So, yeah, while Russia's definitely the junior partner there, they're still a nation to be reckoned with. We sure can't beat them in a war. They would kick our ass all around the battlefield. We cannot take on Russia, and we damn sure can't take on China. And both of them united together, they don't need the rest of the world. Russia's got the resources. China's got the industry. They both got insanely phenomenal military power and capabilities. What's up? What are you going to do? It's that sort of a thing, to the rest of the world. What's up? What you going to do about it? You can't do nothing about it. You're going to sit there, you're going to tell your lies and spin your narratives and come up with more and more BS. But Russia and China aren't going anywhere. They are not going anywhere. anytime soon. It's literally going to take the return of Yeshua Messiah to destroy China. So we're stuck with China as the world hegemon in real terms, in true terms. China is the world superpower, the world leader. We're stuck with them until the end of time. And that's why I warn about them. The New World Order is not going to be run by these sniveling, punk, weakling, snot-nosed Western elites. They're going to be destroyed. They're going to end up in a Chinese Lao guy because they're rivals of China at the end of the day. Sure, at times it looks like they work for China because all the stuff they're doing is actually helping China's goals come to pass. They're weakening us. They're for their reset, but inadvertently they're making China's work just that much easier. To colonize us, because we're going to be so weak by then we won't even be able to lift even a single finger to do anything about it. But even though these Western elites appear that they work for China, they really don't work for China. They're just delusional, and they've been drinking their own Kool-Aid for so long. They really think that they're running things, and they really think that they're going to be able to do something, but they're not. If the whole world was unified, we'd already been under a one world system. But the reason we're not is because there's different power blocks competing for control, and China is the world hegemon, and they're going to win because it's written in the word and it's happening in real life. Everything that's going on in real life 100% goes along with everything that's written in the word. China, the kings of the East, they're going to be at Armageddon. They come all the way from China to Armageddon to fight. So we're stuck with them until the end of time. Only China can create a 200 million man army, because they have the demographics to really have an army bigger than that. They could have an army bigger than our entire nation's whole population. China can take over the world if they damn well pleased, but it would take them time, but they could build up an army like that. They have the industry and they have the demographics. Only they could have an army that big, which is written about in the word. No one else can. Even though India has the population, they don't have the industry to match it like China does for their population. India and China are roughly, the same in population, because India's population's grown a lot. They're comparable in population, but China has the industry that India doesn't have. So China could actually make an army that big, while India couldn't arm everybody. They wouldn't be able to have an army that big. Sure, India's growing industrially, and they're getting bigger, but China is still the top dog in the world in real terms, in real numbers, real capabilities, real facts and figures, real stats. What I do, this is an information analysis and research-based channel where I even combine aspects of the spiritual, because I believe in God and I want people to see that the Bible's real because of all these physical things happening in real life that go along 100% with what it says in the Bible. I want people to see that. But primarily, this is a research, information, analysis, and I make presentations for the sole purpose on this channel. This is a channel for helping people to navigate war, because that's our future. We don't have a Jetsons future in our future in the West. The West's future is a Flintstones future. This place is going to get smashed into dust. And all our cities, everything we've ever known is going to be destroyed. Our future is a Flintstones future, and I'm trying to help people navigate that. We're not going to have this future of all this green whatever and these however many minute cities. No, that's not going to happen, because the Bible tells us that's not going to happen too. This is what will happen. We're going to have a collapse, an internal multi-factional, multi-way conflict. That's in Jeremiah. Violence or conflict will erupt between various leaders. That's what it says based on translation. We're going to have a multi-way, multi-faction civil conflict, just like I made in my documentary. I made a multi-way civil conflict based on facts, all based on facts, figures, and everything else. Real groups, real people. It might as well be. Because all this stuff that I made in that documentary started to come true little by little after I created that. I would call people on the phone and verify, hey, look, this is coming true, just like I had in my documentary. All this stuff is happening. It's happening. That's my metric. That's my timeline, because that's what it says in the Bible. Collapse, multi-way civil conflict than foreign invasion. And in fact, foreign invasion by massive armies is mentioned so many times in Jeremiah. I believe it mentions it 5 times, but that's for emphasis. That's emphasizing that we're going to be invaded by a massive army of foreign people that don't speak our language, that our people don't understand. That sounds like Mandarin Chinese to me, or maybe even, Russian too, because the Russians we know are going to be with them. But China's going to provide the lion's share. Why? Because China already has the biggest forces under arms of any nation. Only China could occupy a nation of our size and do it either by themselves or with allies. But China has the forces already under arms that they could easily do that. We can't even occupy our own land. We had a hard time with Iraq and Afghan at the same time. If you combine the population and landmass of Iraq and Afghan, that's like combining California and Texas. You never have to worry about martial law here, not from our own people, because we don't have enough people for it. Our military is not big enough, and not even all of our military is even combat troops, and it's spread around the world, What's our rinky-dink little 2 million going to do, And it's woke and depleted, hollowed out. I don't know why people are so scared of them. What can they do, The only military that could occupy our entire landmass would be China or China with allies. They're the only ones that can do it, folks. They're the only ones with the raw numbers, the raw power, the amount of vehicles. Only China could occupy the United States. Nobody else could. Either China or China with allies, and they're going to come with their allies. So our military, we had a hard struggle. Our military was bigger back then. It was bigger back then when I was in it. It was larger. When I was in it, we were having a struggle over Iraq and Afghan at the same time. And that's like 2 American states. That's like California and Texas. That means that if we had to depend on domestic puppet forces like Iraqis that we trained and gave weapons to, if we had to depend on domestic Iraqi puppet forces or Afghan puppet forces, and we had to depend on foreign allies to provide manpower to help us, and we struggled like that with troop rotations for just those 2 countries, that leaves out of 50 states, that leaves 48 other states. So that just goes to show you, if they tried to do something like that here, it would fail miserably. It would fail miserably. They could never do a martial law here. The closest thing they could do maybe is hold down some big cities or whatever. They'd have to do something that was like high profile that would scare everybody else, but they just don't have the personnel. Our military is not that big, especially not now. Our military has shrunk substantially because of all the purges, all the things that happened in the last 3 years. This whole new generation of wokesters and entitled kids and everything that get in now. I just look at our military like it's a complete joke. I mean, it is. It's compared to what it used to be like when I was in it. It's a joke now. It's not the same military. It's not your father's military. It's not your father's country. It's not even my military from when I was in. This is a whole new generation that's in. And they basically overhauled our entire military to make it woke, to make it sissified and weak. That's not a war-winning military, and it's got inept and corrupt leadership. You really think someone like Milley is going to lead our military to victory in a war? I mean, do you? You think woke Lloyd Austin's gonna have a war-winning strategy? You think our political parasite leaders are going to lead us to any kind of victory? Wake up. Wake up. It's over. America's goose is cooked. Stick a fork in it. It's done. I've been talking for a while, so now I'm going to get interactive. I'm going to address the chat. I really had to do this before I get off the tubes because I had to talk about this just because of what I saw and read tonight. It just irked me. It bothered me so damn bad I had to come on here and do this. Spit straight facts and figures. Show people what's really going on. Because evidently there's just a lot of bullshit out there, a lot of false narratives, a lot of nonsense. Hey, Rebecca, I see you. Hold on, I can't see everybody else. I don't know why my chat's acting up. Let me see. Let me see now. Hold on, yo, it's not showing me. It's hiding the chat from me. Ain't that something? Well, anyway, I had to do this tonight because there's just so much BS out there, so many false narratives. Oh, okay. Hey, everybody. River Song and Priscilla, God's Land Down Under, and Snafu. What's up, Snafu? Great to see you, buddy. Great to see you. Beaver Valley Updates. Great to see you, too. Oh, hey, what's up? What's up, Aura? Good to see you, man. Great to see you, always. Who else? Who else? I'm not missing anybody, am I? Unorthodox. What's up, man? Good to see you. Good to see you. Yeah, this country's done, like you said, Rebecca. It's totally done, and the people don't even see it because our people are highly delusional. They think that everything always stays the same and nothing changes. They don't understand that you have to maintain things or else they go away. You know, you have to maintain your military at a high standard, and we're not doing that. You have to maintain your economy at a high standard, and we're not doing that. We've let our economy collapse in the last 3 years. We've ran our nation into so much debt. There's literally no way out of it. We can't even pay the interest on it. According to them, so it's like we've wrecked our entire nation because we owe foreign countries all this money and we owe our own central bank all this money. The best thing we could do at this point would be to dissolve the central bank so we didn't have to pay them. At least get that out of the way. But anyway, yeah. Yep, that's right, River Song and yeah, River Song, when it happens, when they invade us, see part of the Chinese war doctrine, it's a blend of regular warfare with asymmetrical, where they blend the Trojan horse concept, which is your asymmetrical part, that takes away the ability to even have a front line. There's no front lines in hybrid warfare, fourth generation warfare. You blend the Trojan horse concept, so you have troops behind your enemy's lines in their own country. You blend that with regular warfare, like your blitzkrieg, your third generation warfare, which is blitzkrieg. You blend fourth generation, which is the blend of the Trojan horse with blitzkrieg, with high new technologies, new innovative technologies like anti-satellite weapons, hypersonics, cyber warfare, very potent electronic warfare jamming, along with other electronic warfare. And you blend all of that together to basically stymie your enemy in every single conceivable way. You make them deaf, dumb, and blind, where they can't organize, they can't coordinate, they can't do anything, because they don't know where the enemy's coming from, because you have Trojan units everywhere that break out of all these different CCP properties, and they come from all different directions. You don't know where they're coming from, where they're going to hit. You're basically like, it's shock and awe at the highest level. Like you're left stunned and stupefied by it because you don't know where your enemy's going to hit you from. And 9 out of 10 times, or maybe if you're fortunate, 8 out of 10 times, they're going to see you before you even see them or know where they're even at. Unless you have like really good scout parties that can stay really well concealed and sneak back to you and tell you where they've seen, enemy forces. Sort of like in my audiobook, some groups had that down pretty well, but at the very beginning, everybody was deaf, dumb, and blind. Nobody knew where anything was coming from because the Trojan shock units all broke out of their CCP properties under the cover of all of our satellites being taken out of the sky, the cyber warfare shutting down on the grid, the internet, our telecom, everything. Nothing was working. So you had all these aspects combined, and you had the externals blitzkrieging inland to act as a heavy-handed reinforcements for the Trojan shock units, which were already inside doing the heavy lifting when they broke out of their CCP properties and started hitting in all different directions from these properties, capturing cities, key infrastructure, key roads, industrial areas, what little bit we even have, I mean, they went for all these different things, went for installations right away. I mean, you wouldn't even see it coming. And it would be over in a matter of a few days. But yeah, I mean, that's how it'll be, and that's what's coming. That's exactly what's in the audiobook. That's how it's depicted in the audiobook from beginning to end throughout that whole playlist, from start to end, from part 1 to the 2 finale parts to show what happened to all the different characters in those 2 finale parts. It goes through the whole process of what happened in 4 days worth of invasion. All it took was 4 days, 96 hours, and the invasion was over. So it went step by step, showing you different examples of different types of occurrences during that invasion. Through the character's perspective, of course, you were on the ground level seeing it, what it would look like on the ground level through the different characters. But it showed all the different steps through that whole process, through the whole 4 days, and then it showed what happened after the 4 days ended, when the war ended and the new phase began, which was the partisan uprisings and the counterinsurgency. It showed what happened to all the characters and how long they made it into the conflict. There were very few of them that made it to the end of the war alive. Most of them died within the first months, or even, if they were fortunate, the first 2 years. No one really made it beyond the first couple years, except for a very small handful. One of them, because she was in a Chinese slave Lao guy and she got sent to China, so she was used as a slave. That was the only reason she made it. And the other one, because she acted in a medical role after her husband got killed, and she acted as a medic type of person, and she stayed out of combat, and she was often underground and hidden locations, working on patients, things like that. Because in Vietnam, they had underground hospitals, schools, everything. America would have to become exactly like that for anyone to even hope to survive it, and also nomadic and well hidden. But those are the lessons that I tried to impart on people through that work. There's nothing easy. Nothing is going to be easy about what we're going to face. And because our population is so utterly soft and war naive, and they don't know anything about tactics, they don't even understand military doctrine. Like this person that tried to argue with me, he didn't even understand that what Russia did was a limited incursion, and their whole war aim at the very beginning, their aim was to go in soft, purposely avoid the Ukrainian infrastructure, and try not to harm civilians, while simultaneously trying to demilitarize their country. You don't have to hold a lot of ground to have to do that. All you have to do is get them to come to you and grind them down. And that's what Russia did. They did other things too, like they tried to do a few different maneuvers, to tie up troops, like their little feint attack on Kiev, which wasn't even a real attack; it was a feint. Anyone with any understanding of military affairs would know that. You don't send a regiment and a battalion, a spec ops battalion of Spetsnaz. You don't send one battalion and one regiment to capture a city of however many million people it is. I think it's like 2.1 million. You don't send 4,000 guys to capture a city of 2.1 million. It doesn't work like that. That's not enough people. It was a feint attack, and they went after those airports and that air base outside of Kiev, and that scared them, but that's what it was meant to do. It was meant to tie down troops. People with no military understanding don't understand these things. They think because Russia didn't fight how they thought they would fight it, means that Russia is doing something wrong or whatever. No, they just don't understand what Russia was even doing to begin with. They don't understand because they don't understand military doctrines. They have no understanding of they don't even have a basic grasp on military tactics or strategy or doctrines or purpose for each maneuver. They don't even understand any of that. Because they're not sitting in the room with the generals coming up with these plans. They don't know what these things are. They never studied these things. They don't even know what a feint attack even is. They don't know what, different objectives are and how you go about achieving them. They don't understand any of those things. Those are very basic things. So anyway, back to what I was saying. I was addressing the chat before I get off here. I had to do this tonight. I really had to. I seriously wasn't going to do this. I was only going to do my finale, my little farewell video. I didn't even want to do this, but I had to do this because that argument with delusional people is what got me riled up in the first place to even do this video, because I had to, because people don't understand what they're even talking about. They don't know anything about our enemies, how powerful they truly are, and how weak we truly are. People don't understand these facts. These are facts. I give facts and figures that prove it. It's years worth of research into these topics. But all right, you gotta go, River Song. I'm about done. I'm almost done. I'm just gonna address a few more questions. I'm getting off myself. But you have a good night if you have to go now. Yep, you're right. You're right, Rebecca. He who panics perishes first. Yeah, Priscilla, they're these Eastern elites are going to do that same thing too. They're going to force the MOTB because they're going to be the ones that have the NWO, the BRICS Plus countries. After they destroy the West and they give their power to the beast, that'll be when the MOTB gets forced on everybody everywhere. But for now, we're seeing the very beginnings of it with the mark, because I still believe that's the mark, but I believe it's the very beginning stages of it. But I think that after the beast gets his power, then that'll be when it's mandated on everybody. But we're seeing the beginning of it because it had to start somewhere, right? You don't just pull a whole working beast system out of your butt, out of your ass. You don't just, the false prophet doesn't just show up one day and pull this entire working beast system out of his ass and say, okay, everybody line up, get your marks. Come on, let's go, get your marks. It doesn't work like that. It had to come from something. So that's definitely what this thing from 2020 is. It's the MOTB. It's just the very beginning stages of it. It's not the full-blown, where it's mandated on everyone for buying and selling, but it's definitely going to be that thing. So I would never take it because I know what it is. It's the mark. It's the mark. It's just the very beginning stages of it. But yeah, when China, Russia, and the East have their new world order, that'll be when the beast, when they give their power to the beast, that'll be when it's forced on everybody everywhere. And that one world currency that the BRICS Plus are coming up with, that'll be the one world currency, not a CBDC, not because the West isn't going to have an NWO. The East is going to have the NWO. China, it'll be China's new world order because China's the great red dragon that gave, the dragon gave his power unto the beast. Who is like unto the beast? Who can make war with him? When you have China backing you, China's enormous population, military might, industrial might, gold holdings, they have trillions worth of gold, trillions. They have the biggest gold holdings on Earth at well over 6,400 tons of gold. When you have China's real economy backing you, when you have China backing you, period, and everything, nobody can compete with you. Nobody has a chance against you whatsoever at all. So China, there's different layers in prophecy. There's a spiritual layer, a physical layer, and there's even other layers, like sub-layers to those things. But in the physical layer of things, China is the great red dragon. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about that. China has the power to do anything they want to do. And the only one that can defeat China is Yeshua Messiah himself. There's no worldly power that can defeat China. They're too powerful. That's why I warn about them continuously, because they're the real threat. It's not these snot-nosed Western elites. It's China. China has the real might, the real power to make things happen. People don't understand that, but they better get a clue, because when you see all the things, all these facts about China, and you put it all together, then the picture becomes all the more obvious. But yeah, definitely, Priscilla. Yeah, that the MOTB. That's it. That's it. What's that? What's not even close? Oh yeah. Yeah, Laura, I'm feeling the same, man. I don't care anymore. I'm starting not to care, and that's why I'm almost done with YouTube. I've said all I could say really on here. I mean, really, I feel like I'm at the point where I've said all I can say to warn people and to try to get people ready. And people are either going to do it or they're going to slack. And if they slack, they'll only have themselves to blame. You had all this material you could look at that you could benefit from, that you could educate yourself from, and you chose to slack and not even look at it. You didn't look and learn from things. You didn't take notes. You didn't memorize things. You didn't pay no attention to it when you could have, when you had all this library of different information available from someone who actually knows what the hell they're talking about, someone who's been in combat experiences, someone who's been to a conflict, someone who studies nonstop international military affairs, their equipment, their doctrines, their strategy, their tactics, other wars, historical wars, puts it all together, combines it with their own personal experience to make real life as real as it gets, hypotheticals, and people didn't study that, and it's even biblically compliant, and people didn't study that, man, people better get a clue, man. They better get one fast. You're right, Aura. I feel like you do. That's why I'm getting off the tube soon, because I'm starting not to care because other people don't seem to care. There's not enough people trying to broaden their understandings of these biblical things they claim they want to learn about so much and, want to know how to deal with the end times, but they're busy looking at the news cycle, which isn't teaching them a damn thing. The news cycle ain't going to teach you shit. When someone else is actually showing you how these things progress, the very mechanics of how it all works, from the ground level all the way to a map level, micro to a macro level. I show the mechanics of all these things. I show people how to survive it, navigate it. No, but people don't want to do that. They want to look at a news cycle, which doesn't teach them anything. They're not learning about field sanitation. They're not learning about different cold and hot weather injuries and how to remedy those. They're now learning about medical things, like basic first aid in the field. They're not learning about field sanitation. They're not learning about how logistics impacts everything. They're not learning about strategy, tactics. No, they want to watch the news cycle that does absolutely nothing for them. People that claim they want to get through the end times, that's what's so damn frustrating to me, Aura. But I see what you said there. I'm getting to that point, man. I'm getting to that point. I'm starting to get tired of all of it myself. If people don't care, then, hey, I've done all I can do for people. Yep. Hey, Beaver updates, Beaver Valley updates. Good to see you too, brother. Good to see you. Well, everybody, looks like I've got to everybody. I hope everybody has a blessed night. Thank you all for coming. Yeah, I don't know. I'll say that real quick before I go. I don't know about that, Rebecca. I don't think they got that many to take it, actually. I think that they just puffed that up to make people think, like to trick other people into wanting to get it because they think that, if the lemmings all do it, I should do it too. I think that's that sort of psychology. I don't think they got that many. I think it's more closer to like 50%. There's a lot of people that didn't give into that. I know. Even in the small town I live in, most people didn't even get that. Which is a great thing. It's a great thing. I think that's more of like I think it's more so far, I think it's more closer to about 50-50. 50 got it, 50 didn't get it. And I think they're upset about that, so they're trying other avenues. At least these Western elites are, but these Eastern elites have their own plans. They're going to be the ones that build the true NWO, and then the beast will be he who gets power from the Chinese, because the Red Dragon gave his power unto the beast, and the 10 kings, the other 9 of the 10 kings, Russia, probably Pakistan, and a united Korea, Iran, and a caliphate. It'd be 10 Eastern kings that would give their power to this beast, and then his false prophet will demand that everybody gets the mark. But for now, I think only, at least in Western nations, at the very beginning of this system that they're trying to create, I think only half of the people got it so far. I think we have to go through a lot more disasters, catastrophes, wars, I think, before people all break down and give into this one world system that comes from the East. Because people really will have no choice when it comes here by that point, because the West is going to be taken over by China and Russia, and China and Russia will impose their will on everybody and turn everybody into slaves, like I put in my audiobook, so people won't really have a choice then. But yeah, it's a disaster. We're headed toward disaster, and people better listen to that audiobook from beginning to end. It's in its own playlist. You can literally press play and listen to the whole thing the whole way through. But anyway, thank you all for coming. Really, all my stuff's in playlists. My civil conflict docuseries, my map level invasion documentaries like 96-Hour Invasion and Pacific Northwest, which is another part of the same invasion. Even my written stories further back in Community, you can read stories that I wrote in Community. But my best work is in the playlist for sure. I mean, most of it is. So you can find all that stuff in the playlist, folks. Thank you all for coming tonight. I just had to get this one out. Y'all be blessed.